Welcome to Drama-Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm a registered dietitian, health coach, and author, and I'm here to help you streamline your wellness routine and establish a sane, more balanced relationship with food and fitness so you can reach your goals without losing your mind. On this podcast, we'll talk about nutrition, exercise, self-care, mindset, and more. I'll be bringing you interviews and expert insight on the topics that matter to your health and wellness. I'm chatting today with my fellow RD, Alex and Olux, who is the owner of Olox Nutrition. So Alex is an integrative and functional registered dietitian and the owner of Olox Nutrition, a virtual nutrition coaching company that specializes in mind, body health and using food as medicine. And we talked about this in today's episode, but it was her personal experience with mental health that really made her realize just how essential food and lifestyle are to managing symptoms of mental health conditions and just increasing overall quality of life and overall health. So she has done nutrition coaching programs around food and mood and really helps her clients with improving their well-being by helping them develop tools to improve their energy, heal their gut, nourish their brains so they can feel strong and capable in their bodies and minds. So we talk about a lot of juicy stuff today. So we talk a lot about, for example, her own mental health journey and how that really informed her work helping others. So food is medicine. We spend a lot of time talking about just how this is controversial and some of the really interesting ways this plays out in social media. And, in our field as dietitians, we talk about how there's this interesting conflict between different groups. And we're talking about integrative and functional nutrition and just how, our thoughts about why is there this conflict that's war when we're all just trying to help people. But we also talk about things like some of the best foods and lifestyle habits for supporting mental health. And we also get into some slew of stuff as well, and just sort of things about what it's like being a practitioner in this space. So as always, guys, I so appreciate you being here, listening to this podcast. So without further ado, let's get to the episode. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to finally be sitting down for a full conversation with you. I feel like we've been in touch so much over these last months, and it's just been so nice to, connect with a fellow RD who cares about a lot of the same things I'm interested in. So I'm really happy that we're recording today.
Me too. I find that happens a lot now. You have these relationships online and you never physically speak to the person or see them. And it's so nice to do that.
But one of my favorite things about this podcast when I'm interviewing people who are healthcare professionals, I love a good origin story. So I would love to know, did you always know that you wanted to be a dietitian, or was that something that sort of came up a bit later in your path?
No, I didn't. I don't think I ever knew what I wanted to be. I honestly don't know where I'm going to be or if this will be the final destination. But my first degree was actually in political science, and that was my fifth or sixth major. So I wasn't super sold on it. It was just I remember switching to it last minute because it had the least amount of public speaking, which is ironic because now I actually do that as part of my living. But I wound up going into AmeriCorps after college because I had no clue what I wanted to do. So it seemed like a really great way to give back and also spend some time. It was a nice delay, right? A little stopover. And then it just wound up that when I came out, it was 2009, which was a huge financial crisis. I had no skills. I had no real life skills. And there were really qualified people who couldn't get jobs. So I had this education award and I was just all right, well, what do I want to do? I had always been obsessed with diet. I was fully in diet culture, right? I was on Weight Watchers as a teenager. I was doing the Hollywood diets. I was anything to lose weight. I was a part of, and I think for me, I was oh, well, maybe I'll go learn and make this my path. And then I'll create some crazy, wonderful diet. And then I'll write a book. And so that's kind of how I'll make a famous diet and I'll be thin forever. And those were my goals going into it, which is really naive and silly. But I think a lot of us, I'm 38 I'm going to be 39 soon. So I was really at the height of all of the really shitty diet stuff going on and like trying to narrow women down as small as possible and being thin and attractive. Those were the things that you could aspire to as a woman.
I remember that well, the dark ages. I know I'm around the same age, so I remember like that being what we saw in magazines and on TV, movies, and like the diets of the celebrities, and like, oh my gosh, my moment, I was I was always interested in nutrition, but I got a BFA in writing and publishing, and I graduated college in '08, and I had thought about nutrition the first time around, but I hated science class, and I got a good writing scholarship, but like I remember being in New York, living with a boyfriend who was a vegetarian, and a really judgy vegetarian. Like, so it was just a very like, and it wasn't a good fit for my body. You should never change your diet to please a partner. But so I was like, I was like hungry for 4 years. But I guess this was maybe like a year or two into it. We would fight a lot because I remember reading a lot, and he got the New York Times, and I remember Mark Bittman was writing a lot about like his plant-based eating, and so my partner was all about the vegetarian stuff, but then there was a lot in the news about like school food, and I remember being like, man, like if we just fed our children better, like maybe like all these behavioral issues like anxiety and stuff, and he was like, well, nobody will listen to you because you don't have a degree, you don't have any credentials, so no one's going to listen to you. And I was like, bitch, I'm going to go get some credentials.
Like, all right, well, fuck you, I'll get them.
Exactly. So that was kind of like I still remember the moment. Like that was what kind of made me be like, no, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to learn about this stuff so I actually know.
Sure. And I think it makes so much sense, right? Like I feel like that kind of now it's like, well, if I can't talk about all these complex systems because I have the nutrition degree, I want to understand neuroscience more. I want to understand more complex biological components that have to do with how we process food and what that means to us biologically, metabolically, physiologically. So now like I'm considering it like 40-41, going back and getting another degree so that I can just continue to learn more. But yeah, like my sort of tripping and falling into nutrition it has evolved dramatically from where I started.
I can relate to that. I thought I was going to be a lactation consultant or like a certified diabetes educator. Sure. And then I started getting, and this is kind of, thinking like what else I want to ask you, because you do a lot of work in mental health. And for me, what kind of lit me up was, I don't know, I've been in RD maybe like 3-4 years. I was working in an ALS clinic. I was juggling like seven different gigs. Like it was insane. But I became really fascinated by the food mood connection and the gut brain research and just how what we ate impacted our stress response. Like that blew my head open. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to learn about this. And I know you do a lot of work in terms of supporting mental health with nutrition and lifestyle. And you've shared that your own experience with mental health was what made you realize just how essential food and lifestyle are to supporting mental well-being. Is that something you'd be open to sharing with us a little bit about what your experience was like and what you learned from it?
Yeah, of course. So I am diagnosed with bipolar 2. So I have the propensity towards, right? Because I have been in remission for long stretches of time, but I have the propensity towards very, very long and intense bouts of depression and hypomania, intermittent with hypomania. So for me, I just didn't know why I felt everything so intensely for so long. And it honestly wasn't until I went to AmeriCorps and I just saw all these like people who weren't from Staten Island, where I'm assuming just being crazy is just kind of like, it's a part of our fabric of being. Like I saw these people from other states and all, like they were not having intense responses. They were not incapable of being flexible in like their time. Like for me, like if I had an idea in my head about the way things were supposed to be or how they were going to go, if I went ahead or if the plans changed, that would be almost, it wouldn't always be catastrophic, but it would be very difficult for me to shift into this new, okay, this is because I put a lot of, like, I used to get very tied to ideas of like, all right, this is going to happen. And if it didn't happen that way, it was like, I had no resilience towards it. I couldn't be flexible. It would cause a very large emotional response. And that's just one example, but I was very over emotional, had a lot of trouble, I would sob and I would there was a mood lability. There is a mood lability aspect to it. So I would be crying, I would be angry, then I would laugh. Like it was, that manic sort of overlap with the bipolar was also really, with the depression was really interesting. So for me, it would present worse prior to my period. So, throughout my 20s, my diagnosis was depression, anxiety, or PMDD. And it wasn't until we started trying a whole bunch of different medications that it was clear that they were making me manic, which then that became much more apparent to my doctors that this is what was going on. And the other issue is that typically hypomania, I'm not going to go seek help for hypomania. I am feeling usually better. Like that's how it manifests for me. Like I'm heightened. I'm not depressed and like low. I'm not low energy. I'm not low mood. Like I want to do things. I'm ready to do things. Like, you know what I mean? There's this in it, there is some sort of productivity that is a relief from the depression. So you don't always seek help during those times. That's not when it happens. It's usually during the depressive episode. So it can be very difficult to actually diagnose. So I was misdiagnosed for 10 years. I was put on wrong medications. And then I hit kind of a point after a relationship where I was like, all right, I got to save my own life. And I wasn't even thinking necessarily of mental health. I was thinking of like just getting healthy. I need to get healthy, right? I can't keep doing this. I can't keep drinking wine at night and watching TV for hours on end. Like I can't keep gaining weight because it was ruining my mental health. So it was this combination of things. And then finally I was like, all right. And it was all or nothing for me. It was like, I did a very intensive 3 weeks of a therapeutic diet and I had never understood what it felt like to feel good until then. It was shocking to me, the change and how I felt. And it was also shocking to me how much I had been overeating prior to that. And I didn't realize it because it was such a huge emotional coping mechanism for me. So everything became a lot easier once I was able to pull a lot of the foods that were problematic out of my diet and really start eating a shit ton of fruits, vegetables, focusing on protein, really doing a lot more activity, meditating. Like it was everything. It wasn't just food. It was the stress reduction. It was the movement. It was the boundaries in my relationship. But it all became easier because my foundation in nutrition became so solid and so nurturing to my mental health.
I love that so much. And I can relate. Yeah, I had a different experience with mental health. My challenge was PTSD, which was just at times like debilitating. Like I would be like either like talk about fight or flight. I was either like in full on flight mode or like horizontal, like could not move. And I would dissociate a lot. And it took me a long time to really understand it. But for me, I found that I needed to eat enough. That was a big thing. But also like I found that having the right balance of protein, fat, and carbs makes such a difference. Like I have found that my mood and stress response are so closely tied to my blood sugar.
Yeah.
Like I have to be not careful, but like it is something I need to be thoughtful about, because there have been those times where I've not been as intentional about making sure I'm covering my bases. And then I feel those little clickers, I call them. Where it's like, okay, like you gotta get back on track here. Otherwise this might not be so great. And it's just, I didn't talk about it for such a long time, but then I realized, lots of people have an experience like that. And some people understand it. Some people don't. But it's like, if I could help other people, understand how to feel better, that would be worth it.
And that's what I think it became so important for me in my practice and kind of what I do, because it made such a difference for me. I was like, how could this not make a difference for other people? And then I would look things up. I started looking into the actual research that had been done. And like, obviously the research on diet alone is a little bit tough to find. There is stuff on the Mediterranean diet. There is stuff on the Mind diet. But again, those are patterns. Those are examples of patterns of eating that could work. And I think it became so important to me to figure out like, okay, how do I make this available to as many people who need it as possible? Like, how do I get that out there? So this has been really interesting because I didn't want to talk about bipolar. I remember I wrote the article for Mind Body Green about how I had bipolar. My father was like, "You're telling people that?" I was like, "Yeah."
And we'll link to the article if you want in the show notes, because it's a really well written article. And I just like, I'll bet afterwards, so many people must have reached out to you being like, "Oh my God, thank you."
So many people reached out to me, and it was it was overwhelming and like so wonderful to see it, because also it, like, I felt like I was taking a risk there, because bipolar is still pretty stigmatized. It's not, it's one of the still very poorly misunderstood mental health diagnoses. It is associated with problematic people. And quite frankly, honestly, at the height of my symptoms, you don't want to be around me. Like, it's not a likable flare. Like, it's not a likable thing. So I was worried, because I've been told my whole life, like, don't talk about it. Like, don't say it. Doctors avoided using it as a diagnosis to like protect me. So it was interesting. And then having that influx of just, this is me. This is what I like. This is exactly how I feel. This is what I'm going through. Like, how can I make this better? That article really changed a lot for me in my perception of shame associated with the diagnosis, for sure. And that was really, really helpful, I think, for me.
Thank you for sharing that. I can relate to that 100%. Like, I know for me, sharing my own story 20 years after the fact, I was like, why did I keep this a secret for so long? Like, I was like, that didn't work so much. Like, that's actually kind of a relief.
I think we do that a lot as people, right? Like, we hold on to things, and we get so worried about the potential outcome that we cause this other suffering that we don't realize can be like completely relieved if we just like let it out. So yeah, so it was, and it's interesting that you said you dissociated a lot, because I can't remember a lot of my teens and my 20s. Like, people will tell me stories where I was like the center of that particular story. And it wasn't because of alcohol and drugs in those times. It was simply, I was not present for a lot of my life. And I'm sure there were trauma aspects to that. It's just, that's not uncommon with the people that I speak to. It's not uncommon with my clients. It's not uncommon with even my friends. Like, these are things that are happening, whether your diagnosis is bipolar, or if it's depression, it's anxiety, or if you just like grew up through the 90s, or like whatever it is. It's so relatable, these things. And I think for the first time in the past, I would say like 5-10 years, we're really starting to dive into ways that we can empower ourselves to feel better. And I think that is, it's invaluable to know how to care for yourself. And I had to fumble around with it. And I was lucky that I was a dietitian and I knew how to like look at the journal articles. So it just feels like an imperative. And you see a lot of people talking about it now. There's a lot of nutritional psychiatrists. Dr. Naidu is right? She's a leading nutritional psychiatrist. She does such a good job of relaying the information. And it's hard because this is controversial stuff and a lot of people push against it, but it's hard to take any of the information that she presents and look at it in any other way as like, oh, this is positive information that is going to be helpful. And then there's Chris Palmer, who's talking a lot about the ketogenic diet and what that can do for schizophrenia and bipolar. And like, these are like really important conversations, and they need to be had because people need to understand just the sheer magnitude that diet shifts can make in the way that they feel and function.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. Because also, Dr. Naidu, she is just I love working with her. Like, when I first connected with her in 2020, I was like, where have you been? I was like, that's amazing. Like, I love her work, and just she presents it in such a great way.
And I don't know her personally. I want to say that I just followed her, and I have found her to be one of the most like just easy voices to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah, and like none of the like the influencer stuff that sometimes comes in, and the ketogenic stuff is really interesting that you bring that up, because I know for myself, one of the game changers, and it's really, as a dietitian, sometimes it's really hard to talk about this stuff because our profession is so like, it's like there's like two camps, right? And like for me, it's so hard to come out and say, like, I will admit that but my unique body, my chemistry, like when I was more intentional about having more fat, more protein, a little bit less carbohydrate, making sure it's still getting enough calories. Like, that was when I noticed a big change in my symptoms in terms of my PTSD and like my mood. It was amazing. And everyone is different, but I've been really intrigued by the research on, like, I'm not saying that I'm not keto. I don't think that needs to be.
No.
But I'm curious to see what we learn. And like,
yeah. And I think it's really, and quite frankly, like, to even kind of double down on that point, I don't think everybody is that different in their need to consume more protein, more fat, and like really reevaluate their carbohydrate intake. Like obviously carbs are not bad for you. That is
Right.
never the thing. But like if you say one thing, it's almost as if you've said the other thing, right? Like if you say like maybe experiment with eating less processed carbohydrates, reduce the portion size, still eat them in like really good whole food sources. And obviously sometimes eat something that's like processed. We're not saying you can never do that, but for most people, reducing carbohydrate, increasing protein, increasing vegetable, which is a carb, but I mean starchy carbohydrate, has such a tremendous impact that it's hard to kind of put blinders onto the fact that this is an issue. That overconsumption of carbohydrates, specifically ultra processed carbohydrates, is a huge issue with mental health. From what I've seen in my client pool and the patients that I've seen, it's from what I've seen, honestly, in thousands of patients over 10 years of practice. So yes, we all have specific needs. This just seems to be a very common sort of issue.
Absolutely.
And I hope you've seen that too.
Oh my God, so much. What I have noticed that when people that I am working with shift the balance of the nutrient intake, and they're more intentional about vegetables, and especially the protein. I've seen that seems to be where I've had a lot of people struggle. Like they come back to see me like a month later and like, oh my God, I feel so much better, I'm sleeping better, and I feel calmer. Like I feel physically like I look and feel better. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh, yes. And it's so important. I am currently working with a group of women who are in recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. And that's one of my first points is, are we getting enough protein? Are you getting enough protein? Because obviously one of the biggest replacements for addiction is going to be sugar and processed carbohydrates. Like, okay, it's the lesser of two evils, obviously, whatever, right? But just in the few times that I've seen them now, just the difference with them being intentional about protein and their ability to just have energy throughout the day, feel less craving for sugar. It's so substantial. And I don't think it should be controversial. I think that this should be openly spoken about. I don't understand all the controversial issues surrounding nutrition nowadays.
Let's talk about that one, because I know we were kind of chatting about the controversy around food is medicine.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
I think it's clickable. I think the food is medicine had a huge surge in the last however many years. And I think that opposing that to fit whatever the accepted narrative is for your group. And it does feel like there is this functional medicine versus the health at every size movement. It seems like these two things are at odds, which they shouldn't be. There really shouldn't be that, but it's again, just in these absolutes, right? It feels like silly semantics to me. Okay, no, is it medicine in the fact that you can pull it out of a bottle and pop a pill and it's going to do a thing? No, but if you eat a certain way, there is a very good chance you are going to reduce your risk for chronic illness. You are going to sometimes you're going to remit and reverse the actual disease that you have. It doesn't mean that medication is not needed. It's not saying that. It's not saying that it is a person's fault for not eating a certain way. It's giving them another tool. And I feel like one of the biggest barriers to people being able to make these larger changes to their diet is that it's not spoken about positively enough. There's this weird intercept where it's no, that's not going to have the impact that you think it's going to have. You need to be on medication. You need to be doing this. If you're on medication for diabetes, does that mean you don't change your diet? That's also not a catch-all, So I've heard a few dietitians state that exercise and diet only accounts for 40% of health. I don't know where this number comes from, but 40% is a lot. It's a lot. It's almost half. So if you can't quite get the stress reduction down, if you can't quite find the community that you need, or you don't feel the fulfillment in your job, or all these other things that are really important to your mental health, to your physical health, to your well-being, these are two things that you can really work towards having some control over. And it's so weird to me, this idea of just 40%. I don't know if you've heard that number or you've seen it.
Oh, I'm fascinated. I'm really curious to learn more about that. Because, yes, they're a big piece of the picture, but there are other things that I am curious. And I imagine that for some people, it's probably a little different. For some people, maybe the stress is a bigger piece than someone else, or maybe the nutrition is more of a thing. Like I think
the number struck me as odd. One, because I thought it was large, and two, who quantified that?
Yeah.
And two, just like why is that at odds with allopathic medicine? Like, why is saying that food is therapeutic? Let's take the word medicinal out. Let's say it's therapeutic in nature and can really do a lot to reverse certain diseases. How is that at odds with the fact that we also need modern medicine to help also? Like, I think all of these things should also, everybody's different and needs different things. And I think that is lost in the messaging too. I feel like there's this need or this desire for homogeny in messaging in nutrition, but like what I need is going to look very different than what you need. Like you said, your boyfriend at the time was a vegetarian. It didn't work for your body, some people really do get motivated and do well with a very strict plan of action at first. And then they learn how to be more flexible. And some people need more flexibility in the beginning so they don't feel restrained and they can make different choices without feeling restricted and they can move in that direction. And I feel like in order to get clicks and in order to show up in social media, specifically Instagram, you have to say, this is the way. This is the way to do it. And that way to do it, that's wrong. Like that's bad for you. And that's not going to work. And I feel like there should be a dispassionate relationship with modifying our diets and using it to see if it changes the way we feel. So yeah, that's like my take on the food. Is like, I believe in food as medicine. I also believe that medicine is medicine. Like,
yeah.
And going outside every day is therapeutic. And like, so I don't quite understand. There's also a narrative that it's elitist. And that I can see more of because it's expensive if you go see functional and integrative doctors and functional and integrative nutritionists and things like that. But, the idea that eating a more whole food diet versus a more processed food diet doesn't have to be elitist. Like I worked with people through the WIC program. I've worked with people in EBT, Social Security, disability. We've always been able to improve the quality of diet so that they feel better. So I don't like that either. I don't like that narrative either.
I'm right there with you because I think it's all what someone makes it to. You don't have to do every single thing. But if there's one area where there's, an imbalance, you can focus on that. And not everyone, I think there is this idea that someone, in order to be healthy, they need to be seeing a functional medicine doctor and spending thousands of dollars on supplements and all these other, all the different tools, all the biohacking tools, I can't tell I can tell I need a vacation or something when I find that because I have to go on Instagram for work. Like if I didn't have to do it for work, I don't know if I would be that present on social media, but I can tell I need to take a step back and just do something pleasurable for myself because I'm I should get a sauna for my home, or I need a I try that and I'm wait a minute, I'm being influenced. And who knows? Maybe these are really valuable things for someone with the means and that's a good fit for them.
Yeah, those are a lot of barriers to entry. And listen, they're great. They are great. If you can afford an ice bath at your house and you've got an infrared sauna and you can do it up. Sure. Right. But then there are cheaper ways, you could dunk your face into ice water and that helps, you can blast yourself with some cold water at the end of a shower. And that helps. Any type of sweating can be helpful. But yeah, they're definitely, and I get it. I get the criticism that there is an elitism to it. But there also is a practicality to it that I think gets lost when
you were saying before, I love pointing out inexpensive protein sources, eggs, beans, tofu. There's a lot of different ways to, you don't have to be getting the grass-fed filet mignon or buying chicken right off the farm. Sure, that sounds great, but there's so many ways, there's so many ways, even just tweaking your portions, if someone's having a cup of rice and a tiny, like no vegetables.
Yeah.
Like, all right, let's grab some frozen vegetables and we put some veggies on the plate. Like,
Right.
does not have to be a big deal or super expensive.
It doesn't. And like, that's one of the biggest things that I tell people. And cold cuts are a little bit more, everything's a little bit more expensive right now, but like keep cold cuts at home. Keep like chicken breast, turkey breast, roast beef is really pricey and I've stopped buying it, but still like these meats, just having them available, or like buy a roasted chicken and pre-cooked and just have it there, canned tuna. Like you're right. Like, there's so many other ways to do this, to use food as medicine, to like use it to change your physiological functioning, that I think to just discount this whole movement as elitist and out of touch is really odd, especially from health professionals.
Right. I just find it so interesting that there's these like wars between like what we're all trying to help people. Why does it have to feel like, I just don't get it. Yeah.
And it's always, but that's honestly, that's what gets clicks, making fun of somebody's beliefs to sort of push forward the superiority of your own. And it's all opinion, right? Like what I do with my clients and my patients, and I'm sure what you do, it is based in, what we know professionally to be as factual as possible. But nutrition research isn't like awesome, right? So we're working with our professional practice. We're working with what we know. We're working with what some of the research points to. And it's not the same for everybody. Like I can give one person a specific dietary protocol and they'll do great with it. And I can give it to somebody else and it can be completely emotionally triggering and it can be too much and it can be, and so we tweak. And that's like kind of the point of it. You experiment and you figure things out. It's not, this is the way. It's not the Mandalorian.
I know. I almost think of that. Like, so I've been curious. So, and this could be whether this is like for you personally or sort of what you share with your clients, but what for you do you consider to be some of the really most important like nutrition and lifestyle factors for supporting mental health?
So for supporting mental health, the nutrition aspects for me are adequate protein and adequate hydration. And then having like as many fruits and vegetables as you can possibly eat. And then choosing carbs that don't trigger you and that don't cause like large fluctuations in your blood sugar. And then obviously we talk a lot about emotional eating with this because a lot of my clients use food as a coping tool. I use food as a coping tool. We all do, but it's about like kind of swapping out that with things that are actually going to help calm their nervous system and really bring them back to a baseline where they feel in control of their choices. So if you're eating a cookie or if you're eating cake, you're doing that because you want to, not because you feel this compulsion. And I've had that compulsion where I could not stop eating. I had it as recently as like a year and a half ago. And this was because my bipolar was flaring. And I like watched it happen for the first time in my life. I kind of like watched the eating and I felt the need to eat like these binges. And it wasn't until I started taking corrective action with food and movement and stress reduction that kind of settled down. And that's another area where there's a lot of controversy around what is the right way to treat when maybe there are several different approaches that would work for so many different people.
Absolutely. I mean, well, you brought up movement. It's interesting because if you have somebody who is like, movement is a great stress management tool. But if you're working with someone who's like very much in the flight response, like energy will say, we have to be a little more thoughtful about movement and what types of movement, because that additional, if we just tell them, oh, go move more, but if they're already moving a ton and they're like in that flight state, that might not be what they need.
Oh my God, for sure. And that's when I tell them, try out some Tai Chi, try out some yoga. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
pull it back a little bit. Because anything time you do something too much, it becomes, or if you're using it as like that soul coping mechanism to just like keep it together, that's a problem. But right, like mixing up the activity. I see more of the issue is getting people moving for my people. And that's where like we do 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes. You've got, instead of like worrying about the 150 hours a week or whatever, 150 minutes a week, just consistently get 10 minutes a day and like start from there. And then you can build on it. But it's that consistency in daily practice that is helpful. And it's also a much easier goal. You can find 10 minutes and there's success in implementing these changes, right? And that success is motivating, and it's not just physiologically helpful, but it's psychologically motivating. Like, oh, okay, I did this for 5-6 days and I've noticed like I feel a little better. I can keep doing this. Oh, now I want to go an extra 5. Like, there are so many different ways that movement is. For me, for the bipolar, I'm like a dog that's high energy. I need high energy activity, and I need to do strength training, but like anything that's like plyometric, combat, like hitting, punching, things like that, that is so therapeutic for me and will take me from like up. It'll bring me down because I get that exertion out.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I love that 10 minutes a day thing, because it's so much about the habit, right? Like I'm sure you see that all the time. Like when someone sees that they can make exercise a habit, it's like a switch goes off. And they're like, oh, this is cool. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. And I think like we don't talk about that. I don't think it's necessarily, there is a discipline aspect to it, right? Like everything isn't discipline, and you don't need discipline for everything, and you're not failing because you lack discipline. But when we apply discipline to habit, and when we do act with some sort of discipline, even if it's a little uncomfortable for us at first, we feel successful. You know, we feel successful in accomplishing something that wasn't exactly easy for us to start or to do, or something we thought like previously we couldn't. And that kind of goes the same way with like changes to the diet. It's not always going to be comfortable. And I don't think that it's healthy to think that it would just be easy and comfortable to make changes. This is a lifelong pattern that you're trying to shift. So I think we have to acknowledge that this can be problematic for some people, and that we need to be there to support them in whatever way they need support, but not to try and kind of diminish what it might feel like for some people to make necessary changes. Because if we can acknowledge it, then we can work towards mitigating those issues.
I used to say, earlier in my career, I would say like, oh, my goal is for this to feel easy for you. And I still try to talk about bringing a sense of ease as a goal.
Yeah.
But acknowledging that it's okay if it doesn't feel easy right out of the gate, but it's also okay if it does feel easy.
Of course. Like way better when it does.
Yeah. But like that was for me, that was something I had to learn, and just learning about, throughout the life cycle, like, as hormones shift over time, like that influences things too. And like to really be really thoughtful of meeting someone where they are.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's, as we've been talking about, everyone is so different. And like a problem I see a lot is people who are, like, I work with a lot of women who are in perimenopause, postmenopause. Mm-hmm. They work with younger women too, but one thing I have found so interesting is that, women who are, in their 50s, 60s, like they're on social media and they're being influenced by 25-year-old influencers and thinking they have to do those workouts, they have to eat that way, they have to buy those supplements. It's just, it's really interesting to be also in that space and kind of see that and kind of trying to find out, okay, what's the best way to like, share information that's going to be beneficial, but, appropriate. Like you can't,
And that's why social media is so tough. Like it's tough because you have to convey like pretty like large messages and like big topics in very limited space and time. And it's like, and you want it to be engaging because you want people to like look at your stuff and you want people to engage with your stuff. And you want to potentially find people to work with you who really kind of align with what you're doing. And it's like a bunch of all these tiny little businesses that we all have access to. So whether you're looking for it or not, the algorithm sometimes shoves something in your face that's maybe not the best for you, but you might latch onto it. Like, oh, this 25-year-old influencer who's like never had a surgery, who's never had a child, who's never had any of these things is doing this. So I'm probably going to do that. And that's going to fix all of my problems. And then, well, sometimes these things help people, but a lot of the times it just adds to that pile of diets you've tried, right? It just adds to that pile of supplements or things that you've done that weren't tailored to you, that didn't really have a specific purpose for you in your journey. And then you're left a little bit more depleted, a little bit more defeated in that sense, I find.
I see that all the time too. My favorite is when someone brings their bag of supplements and it's like 20 bottles of things. And they're like, oh yeah, I bought this for this, but I haven't really taken it in a while. And I don't know what this one does, but my friend said I should take it. And,
it's a fun conversation because
Yeah.
so like put on my nerd hat and like dig into the science of it or that. But yeah, there's
No,
a
it
lot out
is.
there.
My friend, actually, my best friend, she she wanted to change things a couple years ago. I was like, hey, do this, this, and this, try it out and see what happens. So we put her on like these really complex protein smoothies in the morning that had a lot of fruits and vegetables and fiber in them with added protein. She started eating instead of going long stretches of time without eating. She cut her caffeine intake in half. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, she's like, you know what? I feel really great. Like, I don't like, it must be the sea moss I started. I was like, I'm sorry, excuse me.
I love that so much.
I was like, ma'am, it's like you made all of these changes and the only difference you can pinpoint is the fact that you have been taking sea moss. I was like,
I love that so much. But yeah, that's where we're at. It's the
because she's my best friend. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's what you thought. Okay.
That's so good. I love it so much. I want to ask you because there's we were chatting about for a Shape article about the what I eat in a day videos and like some of the just the peak at day in the life kind of stuff and like what we see on social media versus like what's reality. And I would love to hear just like as a dietitian with a virtual practice, is there like a typical like day to day for you in terms of like, what you're doing with your clients, what's happening in your day, or does it change a lot?
I would say there's definitely some routine. Right now, I'm kind of on a break from the practice. And it was because I wasn't engaging with it in a healthy way. So I'll tell you what I was doing. I was waking up in a panic at like 4 a.m., getting to my desk and just like, well, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Do I have to write emails? Do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? Like, how do I make this work? So for me, it was a very fraught experience. Whereas now, as I'm moving back into it, because I've taken about 2 months off, I wake up, I drink water, I have my smoothie, I drink some coffee, I'll go for a walk outside, then I'll go to the computer. Then it's like, okay, what is 1 or 2 things I want to get done this morning? And then I usually schedule clients or see patients after about 10 because my most productive hours are early morning. So anytime I need to get anything creatively done, that's in the morning. And then I see my clients, and then I live in Long Island now, away from everybody I know. So then I just sort of like kick rocks out here and try to figure out what to do with the rest of my day.
Yeah, no, it's that's just so interesting because it's like I've been there with the waking up at 4 a.m. Like, oh my gosh, I need to do that thing. What do I do? And like I like learning not to do that was such a, oh my God, I wish I had learned that younger. Like I would have just saved myself so much anguish and gotten so much better sleep like in my 20s and early 30s. Like, oh my God. Now today, what are some of your self-care non-negotiables?
Sleep. So now it's sleep. So for me, it's actually getting to bed at a reasonable time because I'm always going to wake up early. That's always been a part of who I am. So like waking up after 6 is rare for me, even when I'm functioning at my peak. So I need to be in bed by like 9, 10, 10:30 so that I get adequate sleep. That's a non-negotiable. Being able to be alone in the morning is also a non-negotiable. Now, I don't have children yet, so I don't know if I have a kid. I understand that my non-negotiables don't mean shit at that point, but like for now, I try to keep the dog inside the bedroom with my husband so that I can be away from, I like the time of the day when nobody else is awake, like, and being able to be present and by myself during that time, whether I'm journaling, meditating, shopping online, it's a very like low stress time for me. And I like really love that alone time.
I can relate to that so much. I've been an early bird since I can remember. And like, I only sleep past 6 if I'm like sick, like it's hard for me to do. And I hear you. I don't have children yet either, but like sometimes like when I future trip, I think about that morning routine. What am I going to do?
I think that too.
Everyone figures it out. Like, but it's so funny you mentioned the dog. Like my cats love to exercise with me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I say they exercise with me, like they just like roll around on the mat next to me and like try to get me to pet them, feed them. It's like they came with the husband. So I remember when we were first like together, when we first moved in together, it was like I think we moved in together in December of 2019, and then we got engaged in February of 2020, and then everything shut down and we were living in my studio apartment with these two cats. And like, it was like the best litmus test ever. Like before, I mean, we got married on Zoom. It was like a really interesting time, but like, I remember having to get used to animals like really quickly. And it's just, they won me over. It took me a minute to be like, oh, okay. So when I'm working out in the apartment, not only is my husband here, there's these two creatures who are underfoot that I have to watch out for.
I definitely can relate to the idea of getting used to animals, but my husband owns a pet care company. So it was kind of like a non-negotiable. He's like, we're getting married and we're getting a dog. I was like, I guess, but sure. And I love her and I post about her a lot. Like we have a really funny relationship, her and I. Like it's a lot like we're siblings. So like there's like that butting heads, but we love each other. But like, yeah, like getting used to living with an animal because I didn't want the responsibility. I'm trying to build a business. I'm trying to keep my mental health intact. Like I have had SIBO for 5 or 6 years. And one of the main reasons that I'm so big on stress reduction, it's been one of the biggest hurdles for me is being able to calm my nervous system down with all the changes that have happened in the past 5 years. And it's so the idea of more responsibility, like that's not just me. I'm just like, no. Get out of here.
I totally get that. Every time my husband, like I said, let's manifest a dog. I'm like, I'm not ready yet.
First off, that's called adopting. Like, let's not right now.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm like, one day we will get there. I'm not there yet, but I'll let you know. It's just like,
well, I told you I'm taking this break from like the business and I'm like getting back into it soon. My husband, like 2 weeks ago, has the audacity to look at me. He's like, I want a baby. And I was like, okay, cool. I would like to heal and start feeling real, like, okay again before we take on basically a parasite for me. So like, let's like before there is something that needs me completely and totally besides you and this dog, let's like hold off for a sec and just like give me a minute to breathe, you monster. So I was just like, get out of here.
No, I get it. I'm like, when I first went off the pill, it took a while for my cycle to normalize. I just remember being like, I just a little time with my period first.
Yeah.
To get to know my body again. And like, and I did like all this like spirit baby stuff. And I've had these like really.
What did you do with the spirit baby thing? Because I didn't do a spirit baby thing, but I spoke to a woman who did do spirit baby stuff. What did you do?
So for me, it started with having dreams about like a child and like very specific details. And then it came up like I remember having like Reiki done.
Yes.
And they brought up this child that was very similar to the child I had been having dreams about. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get a spirit baby reading and just see what comes up. And it was like a lot of the same stuff came up. And just like throughout, that experience, I just like, who knows what will happen, but it brought me such a sense of peace just to be like, you know what? I feel connected to this being or this that's out there. And like, everyone's different, but I kind of was like, I feel physically healthy. Like I know that my nervous system is something I have to focus on, but like, I felt like much calmer about it all. Cause I was like, you know what, they're there. They just don't happen to be here physically yet, but that's cool. It's all like, it kind of brought me a lot of peace, but I know there's a lot of stuff out there.
No, and there is, but I don't know. I feel like diving into all of it with curiosity is more intuitive than like saying, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? Just like being curious about a thing as opposed to like, fuck it. That doesn't make any sense at all. But yeah, to your point, you feel physically healthy. I don't. So I want that before, but I feel okay either way. It's just also like I'm turning 39. Like there is definitely a sense of pressure for women, right? Like to get everything together to be able to do all of it.
Right, like you have to have your entire life in order, like your career and stuff. Like it's such and like men don't have quite the same level of pressure. They have pressures, they do, but it's just different.
Yeah. All right, I won't go off on men real quick. I won't. I was going to, like, I felt it in my stomach, but I won't do it. But no, it's completely different. The expectations or what we put on ourselves. I don't know if it's a societal expectation or if it's like an internal expectation, being a woman and being like, well, I have to be, especially as a dietitian, I have to be healthy. I have to be in shape. I have to be happy. I have to be successful. I have to have a baby, be a good wife, be a good partner, like all these things. And it's like, I need to calm down. That's what I need.
Yes. Oh my God. That is gold right there. And I think that's, we're humans, right? Like, yes, we are healthcare providers, but every healthcare provider is also a person having a human experience, and like, there's some things like anyone, like there are some things where we feel like things are in a really good place. There are other things that we are wanting to, focus on more and like we would like to be different. And I think that's okay. It's good. It's like, we don't have to be perfect, but that pressure is still like, I don't know if it'll be different for like younger generations. Like I know that we kind of had all like the hustle culture, girl boss. Like I don't know if it's a function of that stuff, but I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what caused it. I do know that when I am feeling physically more, I don't know, strong, I guess that's the word. When I feel physically strong and capable, I feel a lot better about everything else. Because at least I honestly, like with the gut issues and with like the nervous system breakdown, like I felt a little bit like a prisoner to my body. And I got to tell you, like as a healthcare provider, like actually helping people with the issues that are like, they've become like the cure or whatever has become elusive to me. There is this sense of like, well, who the fuck am I to say anything to anybody? And I'm watching these people get better and like, I can't do it for myself. And I think that's also a testament to like needing other people and being okay with like getting help. Even if you are a healthcare provider, like you need other people helping you. That's what's making these other people who work with you successful. So that's been a humbling experience for me. Like, hey, you can't do this on your own.
Oh my gosh. Cheers to that. I wish more people would talk about that. Like, I feel like a lot of people that we see, they have a team, and I know for me, when I was writing my second book, which literally in the subtitle mentions better sleep, I was having the worst insomnia of my entire life. And I finally, after struggling with insomnia for all these years, I finally went to a friendly sleep doctor. I don't know why I hadn't done that before, but I finally went and we did a sleep study. She was like, "Oh, you have sleep apnea." I was like, "What?" No doctor had ever thought to screen for it because I have like a normal BMI, like young. I don't drink a lot. It was like, but there it was like right on the test. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, she gave me some helpful tools about like sleep hygiene that I hadn't come across anywhere. And it was just, I finally started sleeping like.
And that's so invaluable, right? Like, but I think, like there's also this, I think there's a feeling of like, well, I should know. And if I don't know, you feel like a little bit threatened by the fact that somebody else might. Sometimes, not all the time, but like when you're feeling at a deficit, it's hard to accept help from peers sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. But to your point, it's help. It's like asking for help. And I know, like, I don't know about you, I need to hear this sometimes. Like, I tell it to my patients, I tell it to my friends, I should tell myself more often, but like asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength.
Oh my God, yes. I think I like put that, I have to remind myself so many times. Actually, a woman who went through my program, the Food and Mood Reboot, she became a hypnotherapist and she just started helping me with some of my stuff. And she's like, "Do you remember what you told me like several months ago?" I was like, "What?" And she told me, I was like, I was lying. That's not true. Like, but no, it was true, but it's like so hard to take your own advice.
Oh my gosh. Cheers to that. So Alex, I appreciate you being on the podcast today. It's been such a joy chatting with you. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff, but I want to ask you one question that I ask everybody on the show, because I just love that there's so many different ways of looking at it. And that question is, what does healthy living mean to you? Like today, this moment in time.
I think healthy living to me means waking up and not always having to feel your most energetic, but feeling hopeful and energized for your life and feeling your sense of purpose and being grounded in your own self-worth. That's what healthy feels like to me right now.
Love that so much. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so if people want to connect with you, learn more about your work, how can they do so?
Follow me on Instagram at Olox Nutrition, Olox Nutrition. I'm sure you're putting it in somewhere. And then I also have a website. Do you see me like struggling? Do you see me struggling to figure out how to let people talk to me? Oloxnutrition.com is my website where you can schedule an appointment, take a look at my story, and also check out that article I wrote for Mind Body Green if you feel like some of the things I said kind of relate to you.
Amazing. And we'll be sure to link to all of that in the show notes to make it easy for people to connect with you.
Awesome.
So Alex, it has been a joy speaking with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And all you guys who are out there listening to the show, I appreciate your time, your energy. If you like what you hear, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. They do matter and help me continue to bring you great guests like Alex today. As always, guys, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Drama Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. We'll see you next time.